And welcome back to Stock Talk. This is Joe Rabil with Rabil Stock Research. So as many of you know, I'm a big proponent of multiple time frames, and I do like to look for trend alignment. And I want to show you essentially my favorite pattern to be on the lookout for. Now, it's supported by other evidence using moving averages and MACD, and a lot of times ADX as well. But this is essentially a price structure pattern that I'm looking for in multiple time frames. So let's go ahead and get into this agenda. So in the lesson, what I'm going to do is sort of define trend alignment, especially at a reversal. So we're trying to identify the ability and what I would call kind of like my favorite entry, which is we're getting in early in the upper time frame rather than waiting for the upper time frame to get fully fledged going. We're actually doing it as it's reversing. So we want to start with a higher time frame and look for where a trend is starting to show signs of a change in trend, but it has not completed yet. And then we want to go to the smaller time frame and look for the same thing. So let's go ahead and get into this lesson now, and I think it'll make a lot more sense. Okay, so I want to use this graphic to start, and then I'm going to show a real live example of this playing out. But what we're trying to identify is on a higher time frame, the sequence starts on the higher time frame, and we've got a trend in place. It could be up or it could be down, but I'm going to use an example of a downtrend, and that line is broken. So this is the one where we break the downtrend line. And this is basically right out of my book. So we break the trend line, right? We rally up. We have some follow through from the trend line break. But then we get this black line shows we get a correction back down and form the test of this low here. So we have a move to the upside. That's the one, the break of the downtrend. And then the test shows that we've come back and formed a second low. We have a tested low in place, right? So that's what we're looking for, a tested low. Now, if you look at this pullback here and you dissect it by using fractals, by going down a time frame, and let's just say this is a weekly chart where we broke the downtrend line and then we pulled back, and then you go to a daily chart and you can see it's actually making lower highs and lower lows on the daily chart. Well, in fact, what we can do there is draw another trend line here. And when that is broken and then pulls back, now we have the exact same thing taking place on two consecutive time frames. We have a 2 here and we have a 2 here, 2 here. So this is a 2 of 2. All right, we see that. Essentially, what's taking place here is the trend is shifting on one time frame, and then during the pullback of the pullback as this is forming, we're getting a shift in trend on the lower time frame. So by having that, it really helps us to improve our timing. Now, if you go back and actually one of the things that's in my book is a 2 time frame pinch play. A lot of times what I notice is this will be a pinch and this will be a pinch. So the higher time frame will be a pinch, and then the lower time frame will pinch after that. So we want to be on the lookout for that. The second thing that I notice a lot is on this pullback on this time frame, we're getting a pullback to the 18 on the higher time frame, and then the pullback on this time frame, we're getting a pullback to the 18 on this time frame. So these are some things that you should be able to check and see. Now, sometimes you might break the 18, but it should be turning, or you might not make it all the way to the 18, something like that. But you should have trend support from the 18 in both time frames, and in many cases, you should have MACD providing a pinch play type support when we're setting this up. But if we don't have it taking place in price, I don't look for it in the momentum characteristics, and I don't look for it in the moving averages. I always start with price. I'm looking for this sequence to take place in price. So if we go and look at what took place in Amazon at the low at the beginning of 2023, All right, we have our trend line break on the weekly chart. So I've got a weekly chart on the left and then a daily chart on the right. So we have our trend line break. We move down. This is sort of a steep trend line, but if you look at the way this is played out, and this is again out of my course where I talk about drawing trend lines. It's parallel to the trend line here is parallel to the 18. So I consider that to be a pretty good setup from that standpoint. It doesn't hurt that we've got kind of a bigger divergence developing on this time frame as well. Now we get the 1, and then during this pullback, notice how the 18 is providing support. Notice how the MACD signal line is providing support to the MACD. So we're getting a pinch play to develop as this is pulling back to the 18 on this time frame. Now, if we take this here and we go and look at where that was. So let's clear this off. This pullback is this pullback. All right. And we get our move down just exactly the way I drew it on the prior sequence. We have our trend line. You could draw your trend line like that. You could draw your trend line like that. In this case, I will typically draw it this way because look at how it's parallel to the 18. When it's broken, you're not only breaking the 18, you're breaking the trend line. That's when you know you have a pretty good trend line in place. Notice what happens. We get a move up and then we get a 2 to form. We make a higher low. So we get a higher low here and a higher low here. It happens to be a pinch play following a pinch play. It's also holding the 18 here after coming down and testing the 18 here. So these are the combinations you're looking for if you're looking to try and find a good bottom and a really nice entry earlier in the trend. I think this is a nice sequence to be on the lookout for. This is true trend alignment. And I know a lot of people look for, and I talk about this a lot, where trend alignment is, okay, I've got an uptrend, I'm looking for a pullback, and then I'm waiting for the smaller time frame to get in line. You can do it that way, but you can also, this is also called trend alignment, where we have a shift in trend and we're catching it right at the beginning, okay, right at the beginning of the higher time frame, and then catching it, improving the timing on the lower time frame. And we have two time frames telling us at the same time the trend is kicking into gear to the upside. Great combination, definitely something to be on the lookout for in both directions, both up and down. If you're enjoying the content, hit that like button and subscribe so you can see some new content on the way. Also, just briefly, my services can be found at RabilStockResearch.com. I do want to point out that my book I am making available at a discount right now for $5.99 on my website. If you go to RabilStockResearch.com/book. So if you're interested, want to learn more about MACD and ADX in multiple timeframes, go ahead and check it out. Let's go ahead and look at the symbols now. As we move into the symbols, I'm going to start with Amazon since I had this chart up, and then I'm going to go into the index that I typically look at to start things off. And I just want to make mention that I don't typically cover the S&P, at least not in depth, because I do a video for my YouTube channel for Friday morning that covers extensively, goes into the S&P. I go through all the time frames. I look at the market conditions, looking at volatility, looking at sentiment, looking at overbought, oversold, and then I look at the trend and momentum. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out. So let's go ahead and start with this Amazon since I had this chart up anyway. I am keeping the hourly chart in, even though because of the way the trends are developing, it's not playing as big a role in my analysis right now. I am more focused on the monthly, weekly, and daily just because the trends have been solid. But every now and again, it comes into play, so I like to keep it up there. But when we look at Amazon, look at the weekly chart and notice how this has gotten stretched away from the 18-week. Now, if you remember, I did a lesson a few weeks ago regarding wholesale opportunities versus retail opportunities. To me, this is more of a retail buying opportunity. And I look at retail kind of like this. If I measure the distance from where price is to the 18 to where the next resistance zone level is, a lot of times it's going to be about 1-to-1. All right. So I can see that I don't have a great risk reward situation going. Now, if I get a little pullback here and I get a little bit closer to the 18, it doesn't have to come all the way back, but I work it back closer to, say, 125, 130, something like that. Now, all of a sudden, when I put it up and I look at the risk-reward scenario, it looks a lot better, because if I buy it turning up from here and I put a stop here, I've got this much risk and this much reward. So I want you to always think that way whenever you're buying and you're looking at whatever time frame you're looking as the trend time frame. I think this is the trend time frame, but it's overbought right now. The momentum signs are great. Okay, so I am looking to play a pullback in this, some kind of a hesitation or pullback. Typically, that'll come in the form of the 18 crossing down below the 40 on the lower time frame, and the MACD coming down closer to the zero line. In a lot of cases, the ADX will get back down under zero. So we haven't had that happen yet. It's been very persistent, but something I think to be on the lookout for in Amazon. And if it comes in an orderly fashion, yes, I would be looking at that as a potential buying opportunity. All right, let's go ahead and look at the small cap 600. And one of the things I want to that I really wanted to point out in this index is there's a couple of things that I really like to look at. One is, so this was a very important high in 2018. You see how that started this big decline for that index? And what we've got here is we had a test of that level that was successful. And then what we do is, just like I'm talking about in the lesson, we're getting we got a tested low. We tested this key low, right? We didn't just go up, but we actually came back and tested it. And in the process of doing that, we made a higher bottom. All right. Now, look at what MACD did. It made a lower bottom. It made a lower bottom, and it's a zero line reversal. All right. And the sellers could not get above 25. The red line, the DI line, negative DI, couldn't make a higher high, and it couldn't take out the 25 level. So I view this as a very important turning point for this index. Whenever you see this happen, turning right at the zero line, go back and look at some of the big cap stocks and how they turned right at this line. A lot of industrials did this when they just took off on their monthly chart. So because it's a monthly, it's a little early, and I'd be looking for some strength to show up on this time frame and then look to play a pullback most likely. So I want to see a little bit more strength here, a little bit more follow through, get up maybe up against these highs, and then look for some kind of a little pullback. Maybe it'll be a pinch play or something like that. And we should see a lot of attractive patterns in the small cap arena if it plays out like that. We're already starting to see signs of improvement in the small cap area, but I just want to point out that those are the types of things I think I'd be looking for. But this monthly pattern, I definitely think is warrants watching this a little bit more closely. All right, let's look at gold, because again, on the monthly chart, look at what this did. You see how this came down to the zero line after being very overbought. You see how this is the same pattern I'm just talking about SML, but it happened, at the end of last year, and we got a big move off of that. And that's part of the reason why I'm bringing up the SML, the small cap stuff. So the other thing I like is notice the volume pattern. You see the move to the upside had good volume, and then we got a pretty decent drop, but none of those pullback bars, the red selling bars, had abnormal volume. Now, as we start to move up again, the volume picks up a little bit more. So to me, that's just a minor thing, but something that has shown improvement. We're coming back towards the 18-month line, and the MACD is holding its signal line on the monthly. And then what we have is now we're getting this pullback that's gone long enough to cause a reverse divergence here. This is making a higher low, and this is making a lower low. Meanwhile, ADX is showing strength. Now, the way I would look at this is that we want to watch for a pullback towards the 18 here. And this would be, a higher low developing, and then we'd be looking for a higher low on this time frame. So what I think is important here is to make sure that it doesn't come in really hard. We've seen this happen over and over again with gold. When it pulls back, it makes too violent of a pullback, and then that's kind of it for now. So if we get an orderly, modest pullback here towards the 18, maybe 180 in GLD, I think that would be an opportunity. All right, let's look at the ARK fund. I want to point something out here. a lot of stocks have been showing this sort of basing pattern and emerging strength. And we had the MACD showing improvement crossing the zero line, and we've also shown green DI showing improvement as well. Notice how this ADX line has been rising with price as it moves up. So as we show that kind of confirmation, I don't necessarily look to be a seller the moment it hits this moving average. So that is typically so if we're basing down in here on the weekly and showing signs of strength, and I want to buy this, and I'm thinking that it's probably going to get to the 18-month, maybe this prior resistance zone, and that's going to be resistance, that doesn't mean that I sell automatically as soon as it gets there. I typically go with immediate momentum. And if the immediate momentum, usually off of daily chart, is showing strength, so if we measure this move as it's running up towards the 18-month, look at the strength of the momentum. You see how there's no momentum loss? You see how there's no sign of climax? Because of that, we can assume that we can work our way through that area. Now, we're coming up against the next resistance area. Look at this prior peak here and this prior low here. So if we start to look at it this way, we're coming up against a pretty key level up in the right in the low 50s area, and we are getting overbought. So it does make sense that we would pull back here, but I'm not necessarily looking for this to break down or have any kind of violent pullback. I'm just looking for a wholesale opportunity because the momentum is strong. You see what I mean? So I'm not necessarily selling at key resistance levels if the momentum is confirming. So that's how I usually look at it. I'm not an automatic seller at resistance. I use immediate momentum. I want to reiterate that. Okay, I did want to talk a little bit about the financials, and I've got a few stocks to use as examples because I went through every single financial with a market cap greater than 300 million. That trades an average volume of 300,000 shares or more a day. So it's a decent amount of stocks. I went through every one of those a few days ago, and I was very impressed by the improvement. Now, let's go back to this monthly chart because like the small cap area, remember we were talking about this big support zone here at 30, and notice how we have the same pattern developing. So we're coming back to support, and we get a move off the low, and then we come back and test higher bottom. Well, this is making a lower low, and it's coming down closer to the zero line. Not quite at it like the small cap index, but the same idea, and it's holding support, and it's a tested low. So I think these are all pretty important characteristics that are taking place. Now, if you look at what's happened here, we had this massive red bar with a little bit of follow through, but now we're starting to overcome that. We've overcome the midpoint of that, which I believe is very, very important. Now, I think we have to start respecting what's going on. The problem is, again, we're getting a little overbought. Maybe what this wants to do is come up and test this area, and then we probably want to be looking for a pullback because this is a pretty good resistance zone. So I like the new momentum coming into this. You see the strength that's coming in? I mean, I think that's a really good sign. Something that we should be on the lookout for because I do think that the relative strength line is going to keep improving in this symbol. Now, let's look at a couple of stocks. JP Morgan has been pretty much the strongest one, even through the decline when you look at the banks. If you go through all the banks, this held up pretty much better than anything, and now we're getting a nice breakout with confirmation and volume behind it when you look at that daily chart. Let's look at something like Morgan Stanley. This is a little bit different because this was teeter-tottering. It really wasn't showing any extreme strength. It was more just kind of oscillating around. No real signs of convincing momentum. But look at what's taken place this week. You see the strength behind it, and you can really see it on the daily chart. Look at the volume action coming into it. This is the type of stuff we want to be on the lookout for to see where new money is coming in. And so I'm pretty encouraged by this. And, you know, the more we see of this in the financials, I think that is a better backdrop for the market. I don't think the market typically makes really strong moves when the banks and financials are trading very, very poorly. Look at USB. So these are the ones that have really dragged the financials. I mean, look at the drop this has made. big, huge drop, but it came into major support, okay? This is huge support at 30 in this stock. Now, this is the first low. It's not a tested low, but look at the reaction it's getting. Massive, massive move and good follow through. Yeah, there probably is some resistance coming up here around 40, but based on the immediate momentum, I wouldn't be an automatic seller at that level. I'd be watching it at 40 to see how this plays out. See if any sellers come in. See if we start to lose signs of momentum by maybe moving up, pulling back, and then trying for another move to the upside. But right now, I'm pretty encouraged by what I'm seeing in the financials overall. Okay, let's go and look at something different. So here's WSP Global on the Toronto Exchange. So the question has to do with the fact that this has made a correction back to the 18-month, and it's made this kind of lazy move back up to the highs. We're not really getting a significant amount of improvement in the momentum here. And what I would tell you is that it's too early to make that decision, I think, because we've made this correction. We got the MACD kind of, the ADX, which was overbought. Now it's worked its way back down to oversold. Remember, this ADX line is an overbought, oversold oscillator, just like any other oscillator. And it was way overdone, and now it's worked itself off without any real signs of sellers coming in. Where I think I would get concerned here is a break of this most recent low. And the reason is that this is such a key level over the last year. You see how it acted as resistance a couple times, and then it acted as support a few times. If we break that, then I would start to get worried that we're going to work our way back down to the next support zone. But I think as long as this keeps doing what it's doing, remember, so look at this low and this low. This is a higher bottom while this is making a lower bottom. So it's actually showing some kind of internal strength from that standpoint, which is, I think, somewhat encouraging. So I'd give this a chance for now. See if it starts to show a little bit more signs of improvement. We break the 40-week, all bets are off. Okay, I keep getting questions about PayPal, and you know, we have this sort of, and the way I've been looking at it is like a big bottoming pattern developing, and we did undercut this low but had no follow through. This key bottom here, and there's been no follow through, and we can really see that on the weekly chart. The most important thing to me is this violence of this move. Again, very little follow through, and look at how the ADX did not confirm. So we had really, really strong momentum to the downside here. We came down and tested this low, and we were not really showing a lot of strength, and then we consolidated, and then we undercut the low. We made a new low, but the ADX stayed very, it's like in the mid-teens. Okay, and there was big volume showing some kind of climax in place. So I think those are all encouraging signs. If we look at the daily now, I do think if we got a pullback, a wholesale opportunity closer to, 70, something like that, I do think that would be a trading opportunity. There is going to be some issues with this one. We still have the 18-month overhead, but we have cleared the 18-week line. So I do think this is playable up to the next resistance zone. So got a question about Delta Airlines, and I'm really happy this one came up. Look at the move this is making. We're breaking the downtrend line with some strength here. And the reason I say there's strength is look at the size of this big green bar. Monster greeny on a breakout candle, okay? Overcoming this resistance level. Look at the momentum condition in place. You see the strength of this leg confirmed by MACD hitting a new high, confirmed by green DI, confirmed by ADX, and confirmed by the volume pattern. All right, now we did hit a little bit of volume last week on this topping bar. So it would make sense that we either consolidate back towards this level here, which we haven't quite done yet. I don't necessarily look for a pullback to the 18 when the ADX is rising like this. Okay, this is very important. If the ADX is rising, we only look for a pullback to support, which is very strong here around 45. So that's probably what I'd be watching for. And the way I would do that is, again, going to the smaller time frame, the daily time frame, and looking for some kind of an opposing trend pattern that will develop with the MACD getting a little bit closer to, maybe a little bit below the zero line. Look at DraftKings. a lot of strength in this move, and the momentum has been incredibly strong. You see how strong the moment, look at the ADX, it crossed in early 2023 when the stock was around 20, all right? So when we see that, we don't necessarily sell at the 18-month. It's a guideline. It's telling us where there should be resistance. And if you notice what happened on the monthly, it did provide resistance. It ran into it and then it consolidated and it formed an inside month. And that was it. That was all that it caused. And then we got a follow through move to the upside. So I don't want you to think that I have an order waiting at the 18-month. If the momentum is good, I'm not necessarily looking to be a seller at that level. Look at the immediate momentum based on the daily chart. It's been above the 25 level, and all through pullbacks and everything, it's staying very, very high, this ADX line. That's a lot of strength. And if you notice, we're just not seeing any real selling taking place here. So I wouldn't be in a huge hurry to be exiting this stock at this point. You could probably look for a little bit better pullback as the next buying opportunity. So let's look at one more stock here, MDB. Too much strength. This is not, so the problem, if I'm in this, I'm holding it, okay? But I don't necessarily want to buy it here, again, because if I go and look at this from a risk-reward standpoint, if I'm buying here, where's my next resistance zone? Well, it's up here. It's about a 1-to-1. All right, I don't really want that. I want to look for some kind of a pullback, and I think that would be a better opportunity. So got to be patient sometimes to get wholesale opportunities, and I think that'll really improve your trading entries and overall performance, or at least profitability. Thanks for joining me today. My research can be found at RabilStockResearch.com, and also take a look at my YouTube channel, Invest Like a Pro. If you have any stock requests, send them to stocktalk@stockcharts.com. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.